Aloha. Aloha. Welcome to the Cooper Center and our Sunday evening talk story. My name is Serge Kahili King. As we begin, we'd like to begin with a chant. So, as soon as you're ready, please. You can sit, please sit down. Yeah, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. This is a NoHo chant. It means a sit down. Okay.
Okay, today's a very special day, and I'd like to ask Gloria to go stand up next to her husband of 46 years.
Today's our anniversary. Yeah,
And he's still a fabulous guy.
Wonderful.
Lucky guy.
Oh, aloha ule nani kapori kaili mame kamaile lili o kai o kawei puanani kaoa aheo love each other and how much we love you.
Thank you for doing this even on your anniversary.
Mahalo. Mahalo.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Give them a hand, please. That was beautifully done. Mahalo.
Tell people about the video that you're videoing.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Oh, that looks very nice.
All right, this evening is presented by Aloha International. It's an international organization of people who are dedicated to spreading the Aloha spirit all around the world. We have about 10,000 members in every place. And so this is one of the things we do, and just to share this knowledge. And we have, this is being videotaped for the Hawaii Public Television, and it goes on native TV, and that's broadcast on the internet all around the world too. Okay, so it's a way to get all this information out as much as possible. Okay, so what I like to do, I'll be talking more about the knowledge, but what I like to do is begin with a story, kind of a traditional way to begin. We're going to take a story about the Big Island. And the story is pertinent to our topic of discussion tonight. And this is a story that was told by Mary Kavenapukui. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, way before Captain Cook, there were some fishermen from Kohala. Now, you're all familiar with Big Island, so you know Kohala. For those of you who are listening who are not familiar, this is on the northwest side of the island. But they were going down, all the way down, not on a fishing this time, but they were going down off the Kona coast, down to around South Kona. And that's on the north, also north, well, it's the southwest side. So while they're heading back north, they looked around, and one of the fishermen pointed out, and he says, "Hey, there's a big mano nui following us." A mano nui is a big shark, great big one. And it was just following their canoe. So they kept going for a while, and then it stayed there for a while. Finally, one of the men, whose name was Aukai, and interesting, the name Aukai simply means sailor, but that's his name in the story. So he looked back, and he just spoke. He says, "Hey, mano nui, big shark, what are you doing following us?" And then he said, just the thought came to him. He said, "You know, we're taking some pa'i'ai up to our relatives. You know we're doing that? You want some?" Now, in case you don't know, pa'i'ai is made from the taro root, okay, or the taro corn. Most people call it a root. And it's made by, when they first take the taro out and they bake it, and they peel it, and then they put it on a board and they pound it, mash it up, but they don't add any water to it. So it makes almost, not exactly, but almost like a pretty hard brick. Okay? And then later they do that for transport so that it lasts longer. And then after a while, when they get ready to make the poi, someone takes it and then they put it and add water to it, and that's where they make the poi. The poi is the taro root that has a lot more water in it. You can think of it as a Hawaiian-style hamburger helper. Okay? It helps to make the poi last longer and can be shared among more people. Okay? So this is what they were carrying from South Kona. They were carrying it back north to their relatives up in Kohala. And so he said to the shark, he said, "Do you want some of this?" So he had a small package of it, and although the stuff is hard, it's light. So he tosses the package in the water where it floats, and to everybody's surprise, instead of the shark, reaching up and grabbing it, like mostly sharks will just reach up and swallow anything that you toss in the water, didn't do that. It let it float in the water, and it bumped it with its nose, and it started moving it around and started heading back to shore. Now, they were far enough out in the ocean, they could see the land, but they couldn't see the beach. And they kept watching the shark doing this until he was out of sight. And then they talked with each other as they're still heading north. What was that all about? Never seen a shark doing that. What's going on here? One of them, Aukai, the man who tossed the bundle, he was really interested, but the other fishermen thought it was strange, but not very important. But he just couldn't get it out of his head. So they went back home and they told the story, and another time they came down and to do the same thing again, and there was the shark on the way home. So they tossed him another bundle, one of the small ones. And time and again, month after month, for quite a while, they kept tossing out the little pieces, the little bundles of pa'i'ai, and the shark was always there at the same place and taking it back into shore. Finally, Aukai says to himself, he said to his friends too, he said, "This is it, I got to find out what's happening, what's going on here." So next time they went south, he brought a small one-man outrigger, and they towed that along behind the bigger fishing boat. And so they got back, and on their way, here comes the shark. They toss him the same thing, and so Aukai gets off and gets into the small boat and lets it go and follows the shark into shore. So they're going through the surf, and finally the shark goes up to the beach and pushes this bundle of pa'i'ai up on the beach and backs off, and Aukai is still sitting out there in the surf watching, and he sees an old man come down, using with a cane like a staff, coming down to the beach, and he bends down and he picks it up and takes it off, goes off back into the land. So Aukai waits till the shark is gone and comes up on the beach and lands and walks over to where he finally finds this old man's hut, and the old man was there with his wife. And he says, as he comes up to the hut, he says, "Hey, kupuna kane," which is like a general term for grandfather. Kupuna is an elder, but when you say it like that, it's like a term for grandfather, even though it's not your blood kin. All right? So, "Hey, kupuna kane," says, "You got something for a thirsty man?" The old man says, "Oh, my eye, come on and eat. I'll give you food, I'll give you something to drink. It's not too much food, not too much drink, but we'll share what we have." So he goes down, and they're sitting, and he presents him with some poi. And while they're sitting there talking, Aukai finally says, "This is good poi, but you look pretty old for working the taro fields." He says, how did you get the poi?" He says, "Actually, it's a kind of a strange thing, but there's this big shark who brings me this pa'i'ai, and then I take it and put it on the board and make poi out of it." And Aukai says, "Well, where do you think the shark gets the poi?" Of course he knows, right? But he says, "Where do you think the shark gets the poi?" He says, "Well, the gods must be helping him do it, okay? Because we get it, and this is what we survive on." So, okay, he thanked him finally, and Aukai went back down, got in his canoe, and made it back to Kohala, and told all the people there, all his friends and relatives, and they all felt really sympathetic for this old couple living off there, and The only thing they had to live on was what this shark brought them once in a while. So from then on, when they went south and they came north, they tossed a big bundle of pa'i'ai into the water for the shark to take, and they did it the same way. And this finally went on for months too. And then a day came when they were heading back and expecting the shark, and he didn't show up. They made another trip, came back, still wasn't there. So next time, Aukai brought this small canoe back with him again. He said, this time, he said, I'm going to take the food. So he left the fisherman and paddled in, went up to the beach, and the hut was empty. There was nothing there. He wandered around till he finds someone else living nearby, and he says, what happened to the old man and the old woman? He says, the old man died. The wife went home, took everything, and went home to live with relatives. He says, the shark, Aukai says this to himself. Don't tell everybody about this. But he says the shark must have finished his job. And truth was, the shark was never seen again in those waters. Okay? And that's my story. All right. Now, when we begin looking at that in terms of the topic for tonight, which is communicating with nature, okay? Here was just about a shark. But you notice in this story, which is very interesting, the shark didn't say anything, which is really more true to life. Although we do it in cartoons and stories, when we talk to animals or we talk to weather or we talk to plants, they don't really reply in words. Sometimes we might hear words, but that's because something inside of us is translating. Right? And it's the same when we speak to them. We might speak with words, but there's something inside them that's translating into a language that they can understand. Right? Now, here's the interesting thing here. The shark knew what was going on, what the boat was there for. That's why he started following it. The man who paid attention to the shark suddenly, almost like a kind of intuition, knew that the shark wanted something, and he immediately thought of what the shark wanted, which was exactly it. What does this take? I mean, how can we develop such a communication where we can know something about each other back and forth when we're communicating with nature? Right? Because if we just try to do it from the point of view of, like, people give signals when they train animals a lot of times, and they'll give signals and hand signals that the creature has to learn, usually dogs, and today even cats and things. It's not like that. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with a man whose name is Cesar Millan. Anybody know about him? Good. The man is usually called the dog whisperer. Okay? And I don't know if it's still on, but he had a program on National Geographic Channel where he did such amazing things with dogs. And what he would say would be that he rehabilitates dogs and trains people. But he was able to work with dogs. Unbelievable what he was able to do. Well, he wrote a book. And in the 3rd chapter of his book, he tells what this is really all about. And it has right to do with what we're talking about here. He says that there is a universal language among people, among animals, among plants. He doesn't go so far as plants, but I'm going to tell you, among plants, okay? There's this, in fact, more than plants. There's a universal language. And the best way for us to describe this universal language in human terms is it's a language of emotion. Every thought we have, every focus we have, sends out a wave of emotional energy that carries information. Now, there's lots of ways to actually test this, okay? But just suffice to say right now, let's think of it as a theory, that every time we have a thought, boy, this goes out, carried by a wave of emotional energy. The more focused the thought, more intense it is, the more emotion behind the thought, the stronger that wave. And the people and the animals and the plants and the elements of nature around us respond to that. Right? They respond to that. And it all depends on what it is. One of the things that humans do that interferes with good communication, actually, is that we have this strong tendency, there's a technical term called anthropomorphize. Well, throw that one out. We'll call it humanize. Okay? We have a strong tendency to humanize nature. Sometimes this is useful, makes for great storytelling, right? And sometimes it's even useful for being able to begin a communication. But you're never going to get any deep, good communication unless you remember that animals and plants and the elements are not human. So as an example, let's take a good one. We here are living right close to Pele. And don't forget, in Hawaiian language, Pele means molten lava. Okay, that's Pele. Okay? So anyway, we are here and Pele responds to human emotion very strongly. But what a lot of people do is think when she erupts, she's angry. No, she's erupting. That's what Pele does. Okay? One of her behaviors. Okay? It has nothing to do with anger in human terms. And if Pele comes down the mountain and runs over a house or a village, it's not because she's angry, it's because she was there first. And she's going to run wherever she feels like it, feels the need to. And if human beings are so brave that they want to build their houses in the right where she flows, why, she doesn't really care. Okay? So she's not trying to hurt us. But if we get in her way, we can get hurt. Right? It's simple as that. It's not on purpose. Gravity's not there to cause us pain, but we step off a high building or a cliff, we're going to fall and get hurt. Not because gravity doesn't like us or the earth doesn't like us, but because that's just behavior. Okay? So one of the things this brings us to is part of the skill of communicating with nature is getting to know it. Getting to know it. And the more you can learn about a particular part of nature that you're interested in, whether it's dogs or cats or pigs or plants or weather or clouds, whatever it is, the more you learn about it, the more you incorporate a pattern that enables communication better. Let's put it in real simple, modern technological terms. When you have a master mechanic who really knows engines inside and out, that person can listen to an engine and tell you all kinds of things that are happening that other people, without that familiarity, do not pick up. And I've watched this in operation, and it's not a logical thing. It's not a logical thing. He listens, and there's an intuitive knowing, bolstered by the pattern of knowledge he already has, okay, that gives him information. Same thing happens if you work with plants a lot, if you work with computers, if you work with cars, anything that you really get to know. If anybody's in here as therapists who works with people, you may know that sometimes you're working with a client and suddenly you know exactly the thing to say, exactly what that person needs, and it doesn't come from any logical analysis. Okay? It comes through, in the theory that we're talking about, it comes through this emotional connection. But it's able to come through the more knowledge you have about what you're communicating with. Now, sometimes you have a natural rapport with something and you get insights about it spontaneously, and that's good. But it's like a little window of opportunity opens up and, oh, wow, that's good. But when you really get to know more knowledge about something, then it happens anytime you want it to happen. Okay? And that's a big difference. Okay? You'll have a natural talent for it, and it'll happen occasionally. But when you really learn about it and build those patterns inside yourself, it happens more and more and more often until you think that's the natural way for things to be. Right? Now, one of the things that helps going on, knowledge is very important. Another thing that really helps a lot is the state that you're in. The more relaxed you are, the easier it is to get this exchange of information. The more tense you are, the more focused you are on something else, the more you're blocking a large part or sometimes all of the information. Right? So tension is a big, big factor in being able to communicate better. Okay? It's a very important thing. Somewhere going along with that, if you have a certain amount of tension because of your state, I was just saying that you block it. One time, I happened to have a very good rapport with rocks. Stone, rocks, that kind of thing. And one time, Gloria and I went to Ayers Rock, which is in Australia, in the central part of Australia, okay? And so we were there, and I was trying to tune into the rock, the big, beautiful red rock out there, and I wasn't getting anything, which was very unusual for me. So then I had to stop and think about and feel myself and feel, why aren't I getting anything at all? Well, insight came. Maybe it came from my bones, because that's stone too, okay? But insight came. First of all, we just come off an international trip, okay? It's not like we were totally relaxed yet. But another thing was, we just came off an international trip. I was doing workshops. I was involved with people. My thinking was too fast. Rocks think very slow, okay? And so I had to sit down and not just relax, but I had to put myself into a kind of a thinking pattern of slowing down my thoughts. And I got finally to a certain level, and this intuitive communication began to happen, okay? And I learned a lot, both about me and about rocks. That's a very wise rock down there, okay? It's a good teacher rock, actually. But it didn't happen until I was able to kind of, as far as humanly possible, match the rock's normal pattern of emotions and energy, okay? I'm sure I missed an awful lot, because we can only slow down so far as human beings without leaving, okay? But it opened up a lot more communication than I had before. The same thing happens with plants. Now, well, I'll give you another story about rocks, first of all. This is when Susan, who was doing one of the chanting, and Gloria and I were living on Kauai. And we hiked around all over the place. We saw a lot of rocks. Rocks across streams, rocks on the beaches, rocks in the fields. And we didn't pay too much attention to them. They're rocks. Then one day we took a course, a weekend course with a young Hawaiian man who was studying the ancient ways of working with rocks, stone carving and all that kind of thing. And he took us on a field trip. And while we were learning things about how to carve and make bowls and how adzes were done and everything like that, the field trip was fantastic, because on the field trip, he was showing us how to recognize hammerstones, adzes, knives, like sanding stones, and changed our life. Because now, when we go hiking, anywhere, actually spread out to a lot of things, but when we started hiking after that on Kauai, we weren't just seeing stones anymore. We were seeing tools. We were seeing places where humans lived. We were being able to tune into what was going on with them and in their natural surroundings. I mean, this whole world opened up because we gained more knowledge about the thing. Okay? Now, when we first moved over here, hasn't been too long, I was fascinated by the plants, but I didn't know these plants. In fact, all the time I was on Kauai, strangely enough, I got into rocks a lot, but just a little bit into plants. But here, something happened. The energy was different. The plants maybe have a stronger emotional base or something because of the volcano they're living on. But I just started getting very interested in plants, but I didn't know anything about them. I just wanted to. And so I couldn't recognize anything. I mean, oh, I know, that was a tree fern. Okay, I got that very quickly. And that was about it, although fell in love with them. So then here in Volcano, actually at the Niaulani Center over there, a Volcano Art Center, why they held classes run by a guy named Tim Tyson. Incredible man. And so we've taken several courses with him in which we get to learn how to recognize native plants. So now when I'm walking out on the lava fields, or I'm even walking through the forest on our land and walking around just on the roads, I'm with a bunch of friends. There's a recognition, and not only a recognition, but it feels like an emotional exchange. And say, if it feels like an emotional exchange in this philosophy, it is an emotional exchange. I mean, who's going to tell you different, okay? Because reality is experience. So we learned about it in what seemingly logical way, but that helped establish a pattern that could resonate when we really started going out and recognizing and connecting with these things. One of the things we also learned was, and this is an important part, paying attention. Because if you're interested in some aspect of nature or not interested, you don't give it any importance, you just pass it by like we used to do with the rocks on Kauai, why there's no communication going on. You're not paying attention to it. If you just look at the plants around, boy, that's a lot of green, there's no communication going on. Right? If you want to, some people have pets, okay, but they don't really communicate with them. They don't pay a lot of attention to them. Right? I mean, they're there. Some people get them because they think they should. Some people just want a dog in the yard. But they don't know, there's no communication going on. A lot of times the animals get real upset about that because they live on that. But anyway, if you don't pay attention, even if you have the knowledge, even if you've got that knowledge base, and you don't really put your attention on what you want to communicate with or have a good rapport with, then there's very little of that intuitive knowledge, of that intuitive communication taking place. You watch, I go back to Cesar Millan, watching his programs. When he's with a dog, he's with that dog. His full attention and awareness is on that dog when he's with it. And that's a major part of what he's able to do. If you're out in your garden and you're weeding or working in your garden, if you're thinking about shopping, or you're thinking about the children, or you're thinking about paying taxes, whatever it is you're thinking about, there's not much communication going on. If you want that deeper communication, intuitive insight, ideas that don't even have anything to do with plants, but that will come to you through that connection, okay? Then if you pay attention to what you're doing, you do it lovingly, and you feel the dirt, and you feel the plant, and hey, talk to it, because talking to it is going to carry a wave of emotion with information, okay? And the client will translate it, okay? But paying attention is a very important factor also. Now let's go with another factor, and that's being present. Being present right here and now, okay? Sometimes, a lot of us aren't really used to doing that. One thing you learn about nature, though, is nature lives now. Nature doesn't live in the past, and the nature doesn't live in the future. Immediately people start thinking about bears who hibernate and squirrels who put away nuts. Squirrels pay attention to the signals of what's happening now, and that tells them it's not putting away time. Okay? They're not thinking, oh, the snows are going to come. No, this is not putting away time. Okay? And it's because of what's going on, changes in temperature, wind patterns, clouds, whatever's going on that they really connect with. Okay? Nature really exists in this present moment without a past or a future. It simply is. Humans, we are fantastic in our ability to imagine. We can get carried away with it because we have that to an exceptional degree, but that enables us to imagine what was, and folks, that's all it is. We can imagine what was. We can even imagine what is. That's where we get a lot of storytelling from. Okay? We can imagine what will be. The problem comes when we react to that imagining rather than to what's going on. Okay? We can learn a lot from all kinds of things in nature about this concept of presence. Now, when you're present with something, this is another one of the factors that helps that communication go on, because emotion is happening now. Okay? And if you are remembering something that happened that you have a bad memory about, emotion is happening now. The animals, the plants, the weather will respond in whatever way they do, sometimes by getting more active, sometimes by getting more depressed, in our terms. But they'll respond to the emotions. When a lot of people are feeling emotions about something, I'll give you an example. I used to live in Southern California, a place called Malibu. And what we used to have in Malibu was a lot of forest fires. And what happened with the forest fires, it was very interesting because it was not, the forest might have happened accidentally without somebody setting it, but the way it behaved afterwards seemed to indicate that it was aware of what was going on with the people. Now, every time there was a lot of social unrest or anger in that Southern California area, the fires would burst out all over the place. And when they'd come roaring down through Malibu, I'll give you two examples. Some examples of that. My son was living on a hill back in the mountains. And the fire came roaring up, rushing up the hill, and stopped just around the property on top of the hill that he was. Backed away and went elsewhere. Okay? Because, none of them were angry. When you followed the fire pattern, which they did, these fire patterns in those days, when you followed the fire pattern, it would leap over several houses to get one. And sometimes go through alleys and things like that to get one house. I remember one house right on the coastal highway, the fire did that. It came through several different houses and burned that one down. And the interview, when the man was interviewed in the paper, he said, well, I was wanting to get rid of that house anyway. I was just about to abandon it. That was very interesting. And you hear all kinds of stories after the fact, after the things happen. Okay? There was a big hurricane on Kauai. Why? There was no accident. Kauai was in the worst emotional shape it had been for an extremely long time, and it hasn't gotten back to that, thank goodness. But there were three major things going on that everybody was getting angry about. So what did the hurricane do? Went south like it usually did until it reached the latitude, the exact latitude of the center of Kauai. You can go back and look at the records. And made a right angle turn. Now, nature rarely makes any angles. It made a right angle turn dead center on Kauai. Changed the entire island, changed the entire feeling. Okay? So that after the hurricane, when we went down, we had to be fed by National Guard and Army units who came into the area. And so people would come there, and you'd think there'd be anger about what happened with the hurricane. No, the hurricane took all the anger away. And when people came together for a meal, somebody would say, a lot of people said this, "You should see my view." Yeah, because everything around him was gone. And the FEMA director at the time was a general. The FEMA director at the time, he said he had never been any place where there had been such cooperation, where there had been such help. You'd drive along the highway and you'd see signs that people tacked onto trees. Thank you, FEMA. There were no complaints. There was no looting. Zero. There were warehouses the walls had been taken away and the stuff sitting there, no one touched it. They called it, somebody afterwards called it Hurricane Aloha, okay? Because it brought the aloha back to the island, it really did. But in the way of thinking that we're talking about right now, it happened because there was anger, and that anger had to be cleared, and a hurricane was the only way nature could do it, because the emotions were just upsetting everything. Not upsetting in human terms, okay? I have to keep back in that. Not because it was mad or angry or upset in a human term, but upset from its natural patterns. And that's what human emotions can do. Okay? Of course, we know we can do it with our pets, with our animals, things that are close by. We know that can do it with the people who are close by, too. It can happen that way. Sometimes getting back into the present moment helps you deal with the people around you better. Okay? Drop the past. Somebody, I think it was Ingrid Bergman, said once that the secret of happiness is a poor memory. Okay? So let's look at another thing. This takes us to another thing, which is, in addition to all the things I've said before, if you can add this one, it gets better and better, each thing we add. This one is aloha. And when you are wanting to communicate with any aspect of nature, and human beings are part of nature too, the feeling of liking something about what you want to communicate with, knowing is very important, but liking it takes you deeper. Okay? And the more you have an appreciation, actually sometimes knowledge about something helps that appreciation. Okay? But the more you have appreciation of some kind, why the deeper that connection becomes. And in surprising ways, you have to experience this for yourself. In surprising ways, from the nature around you, you get unexpected help sometimes. Okay? It can come from your cars. I love my cars love me back. If they have to break down, and they do sometimes, invariably it's convenient. It's in my driveway, in front of a gas station. Always. If it happens conveniently. Now, in the way I was brought up, in the way that I think, and I'm sharing with you, that's not an accident. It's because of the rapport. Okay? You'll find your plants will grow better, your things that you love will last longer, your clothes will stay cleaner. I mean, it just spreads over everywhere. There'll be a difference in the way things respond to you, in the way your environment acts. If there's appreciation. Now, appreciation can be simple. Gee, you're pretty, I like you, you're nice, hope you're happy. Those are all simple forms of appreciation that make a connection. Okay? And make a difference. Right? You have to try it out. Okay? You can think, oh, this is kind of off the wall, but you got to try it out. It makes a huge difference in everything in your life. Right? The smallest things, the big things. Now, we come to another thing. This one is based on the concept, what I'm going to say now is based on the concept of mana. Now, you've probably heard it called mana, but that's not correct. It's mana. And also you probably heard it talked about as energy, which it's not. Okay? Mana is power. Power in the sense of not power over anything. It's the ability to influence. Another word that can be used is authority, but it's not authority that just sits there. It's the authority that has the ability to influence. That's what mana is. Okay? So old Hawaiians revered, in the ancient times, they revered the major elements of nature because, boy, did they have an ability to influence. Okay? So those were the ones they gave the important names to, and those are the ones that they revered the most. Okay? And of course, Pele got a lot of respect, mainly on this island, okay? But, and still does. Okay? Even the Rangers talk about her with respect. It's very interesting. Because that's a powerful force, and powerful in the sense of ability to influence. Now, everything has mana to some degree. It has its own mana, its ability to influence. Some things in nature of the same type have more mana than other things of the same type. Right? We don't know exactly why. I think part of it has to do with where they're born or how they grow, but we know that some trees are more lovable. Some trees are more healing. Some trees are more aloof. Okay? Not as much effect. Okay? And they can be the same type of tree, but they feel different. The more you get into this, the more you start to recognize those differences. Plants, animals, pets. If anybody who's raised a lot of animals like dogs or cats, you know all the differences coming out of the same litter. Really, really different psychological profiles, we could call it. Okay? Behavior patterns. Okay? Each one has its own mana. Now, what you have to do with mana is respect it. Respect the mana of gravity. Okay? That's important if you're walking along the edges of cliffs and climbing ladders and things like that. You respect the mana of the clouds. You respect, and don't forget, your mana, your ability to influence, your ability to help. A couple examples of helping, how this can be done with anything. But one example, this took place on Kauai. We had a museum over there in Kilauea on the North Shore. And it had big plate glass windows in the front. It was a separate building all by itself. And I came up one time, and inside the building was a really big wasp. And just when I came up the stairs, it was bouncing its head against one of these plate glass windows, trying to get out, couldn't find its way. So I walked up there, and I know a little bit about wasps, so I mainly had to use focus and presence and appreciation. And when I felt that I had kind of gotten the attention or gotten a kind of a rapport, I imagined with my mind, this is what humans do beautifully, but I imagined a golden path in the air from where the wasp was, back into the room, around a pedestal, and out the front doors. And probably 10 seconds after I imagined this path, oh, and I also told the wasp, there's your way out. Okay? And about 10 seconds after that, the wasp turned around and followed that path, even around the pedestal, followed it exactly and went outside. Okay? I had to get into that rapport state first, because if I just come up and say, why don't you get out of there, you idiot wasp? That would not have worked. Okay? In fact, I might have had a surprise if I walked in there. But getting into that rapport and gently guiding. And the image, I doubt if it saw a golden path, but it felt the emotional pattern that went along with that. I've done this with, I remember doing it with a bird that got stuck in a big house in Denmark. And so I went in, and the bird was fluttering, it was panicking, it had gone into the door, down a hallway, and into a big sort of a living room. And it was panicky back and forth, didn't know what to do. So I quietly went in and sat down and went into a very relaxed, focused state until I could feel the bird calming down because I was calming down. And when the bird calmed down enough to sit and perch, then I'd use the golden path again. Okay? I couldn't see the way out, so I had to imagine it from memory. And I just gently told the bird, that's the way out. It was probably another 5 minutes. It fluttered a little bit and then finally stopped, rested, and followed the path out. Just no hesitation. Boom, just like that. And this is not because I have any special talent. This can be done by anybody willing to take the time and get into these states and use these things that I've suggested. Okay? We all have that same ability. Last one I'll mention, just briefly, is, I've given you certain ways to do it, and kind of almost like a process to do it. There's only one way to do things. The last idea has to do with using what's ever effective for you. Some people might do a particular type of meditation. Some people do a lot of visualization. Some people will find other ways to get the same thing done. The connection, the rapport, however you do that, will be effective. And it doesn't matter what part of nature you're interested in, this is how you can make the connection, this is how you can communicate. Do I have any questions? Anybody? Yes?
Did you write about that technique of guiding animals out there?
In one of my books, I wrote about it, yes.
I read about it years ago, and I've been
Yeah.
reading it for years.
Yes.
And
Yes.
So this communication is more intuitive, is that?
Yes. In this kind of communication, it's more intuitive, and what happens is your words help guide your feelings. Okay? The words are not being translated. The feelings are being translated, but the words help you focus and guide your feelings. That's where the benefit of words is.
We tried this with mosquitoes.
Oh yeah, let me give you some things about mosquitoes. This is well, for Kokies, I have this rapport with Tim Tyson, who goes in and gets the Kokies. Hey, whatever's effective. Remember what I said? Right. But let me give you a thing about mosquitoes that's very interesting. There are certain things that mosquitoes don't like, okay? And a lot of people will put them on their skin. One interesting way is, one thing mosquitoes do not like is eucalyptus. But instead of putting it on your skin, if you'll suck on a eucalyptus drop, you'll get that in your bloodstream, and the mosquitoes will tend to react to that. Okay? Now, the more emotional you are, the more stressed you are, the more you'll attract the mosquitoes, because why do they leave the plants? Okay? They're eating plants or sucking up the sap of plants all the time when we're not around. And why do they come running to us? Because if we're stressed from walking or anything else, we have more sugar in our blood. And this is what they're getting from the plants. They get a lot more of it from most human beings. So the more unstressed you can get when you're going into a mosquito area, the less they'll bother you. But then I'll give you another technique. Now this is kind of far out, but I'm just going to share it, and you can do what you want. Okay, I didn't have any eucalyptus drops, and we were off in a place with all kinds of mosquitoes. What was I going to do? Well, because of my background and because of my rapport with plants, I imagined that I was a walking eucalyptus tree. One of the kind that really smell, okay? Everybody else got bit, and I never got touched, okay? Because what was happening? My focus was sending out an emotional wave that had information that said, this is eucalyptus, stay away. I didn't have to tell the mosquitoes to stay away. That causes stress and attracts them, okay? I just was the eucalyptus. They got the message and reacted to that, okay? Very interesting, really worked well. Yes?
less sugar, would that attract mosquitoes less?
Normally, I think it would. It would depend on that person's metabolism, okay, and how they process it. But typically, yes, you want to drink a Coke just before you go into a mosquito area, you'll probably get a lot of mosquitoes attracted. Yeah. Or any other sugar thing, right.
Doesn't attitude have a lot to do with it?
Attitude, of course, has a lot. But see, look at the attitudes we've talked about. We talked about the attitude of respect, the attitude of appreciation, the attitude of being present, being focused. Those are all attitudes, too. So yes, plays a very big role. And of course, if you have, for whatever reason is going on in your life, a negative attitude about anything, that's going to stress you up, cut you off, or attract those that like that. See? So yeah, attitude is a big role.
I decided several years ago after living here that mosquitoes were just not going to be a part of my life.
Yes.
And I mean, I really have noticed a huge change.
Sure. They probably consider you invisible.
Well, it's amazing because I'm really a sugar person, you know.
I know, but see, you've got this other pattern
I
there.
think I do. I really, yeah.
Hey, that's
It wasn't
right.
on the frogs, though.
Good, good. Let us know. Let us know.
It is kind of the acceptance, and, you know.
It is, that's right.
think about.
The more you try to push certain things away, the more they'll push back.
Right.
Yeah, right. Comment, question.
When I first came to Hawaii, there was a Hawaiian man that geckos were like, you know, the aumakua, they would like, when they heard of the town thing, they would chirp. Did you hear when you were talking earlier? I hadn't heard of geckos since I've been here. And all of a sudden today, when you were talking about adding plants to the list of what's alive, you could go with.
Yeah, yeah. They,
They have a consciousness to understand us that well.
of course, just like the shark that knew the pa'iai was there, okay? They do. Yes.
How do you speak towards the concept of the dolphin-human connection?
This is the same thing, the dolphin-human connection. Dolphins are much more complex animals than most people have been led to believe, okay? Wide variety of emotional states, wide variety of behaviors, chimpanzees also. But there is a strong emotional connection. I'll give you another little story of that. When we were living on Kauai, there was a woman came who got a group of people, including Gloria, to go out and swim with the dolphins. And a lot of people go out and try to swim with the dolphins, and the dolphins go swim someplace else most of the time. But this woman knew the technique. She got everybody out there swimming well away from shore, and everybody sang, "You are my sunshine. You are my sunshine, you are," I mean, all happy and gay and singing out there in the middle of the water, and a whole pod of dolphins came. Not attracted to the sound, but attracted to the feeling. Okay? The happier you are, the more loving state you are, that's what attracts them, and that's what they'll come around to. So it works exactly the same way. And it's a strong rapport because they will react to a human in distress as they would a dolphin in distress, unless they're stressed, okay? But normally, in normal circumstances, they will help. And I have to bring this up too. This is my theory. My theory is that Hawaiian language has changed a lot since the ancient times, and that a lot of shark stories are actually dolphin stories. Because a lot of shark stories, now there are Hawaiians who have the shark aumakuas, no doubt about that, but a lot of the ancient stories that are told are identical to what we know as dolphin behavior, okay? And so I just suspect that a lot of them are that. One thing that led me to think that, I'll just give one ancient story. One of the goddess figures is Huna, so probably the oldest one in all of the Pacific, okay? A female, feminine figure. Down in the South Pacific, she's called Ina. Now, this is an interesting thing because Ina in Hawaiian means angry. And Ina down in the South Pacific also means angry, but it's also the name of the goddess, a variation of Hina. But this story, she is on an island and she wants to go to another island. And so she calls two sharks. This is how the story was written. And the two sharks came up, and she jumped on their backs, 1 foot on each shark, and ordered them to take her to this other island. So the sharks are going off, taking her to this other island. She's standing up like that, and she gets angry because they were going too slow. So she reaches down and she hits each one of them on the head, okay? And that's why all sharks, this is what the story said, why all sharks have bumps on their heads to this day. Well, I thought that's really interesting because sharks don't have bumps on their heads. Dolphins do. And that led me into researching this, and so this is my own private theory. But it makes interesting reading when you assume that it's a dolphin being talked about instead of a shark. Okay? Very interesting. Yes?
Serge, we all, enjoyed not having this last hurricane here.
Yes.
And my wife and I were out here only since February, so we didn't know any better.
Right.
We didn't listen to the local advice, and we put up some boards with some of the neighbors. But I was struck that so many of the people here basically just said, not coming.
That's right.
I said, well, it's a category 3. It was aimed at my house. And, and it's a day away. And
Right.
people are being very casual fellow residents, most of them. And so, we were all set, and I dialed up in the lady radar picture, and I looked and the thing came, and I said, oh boy, I get to enjoy that already. As you know, that thing all happened.
That's right.
Why do you think? Is it part of the
Well-
attitude that the people just said no?
It's not just, there were an awful lot of people also focusing on that.
I'm sure.
So here's the way this kind of thing works. There were a lot of people who were doing various forms of mental work or emotional work or visualization, whatever. Lots of different methods were used. In fact, a lot of our people around the world were also tuned in for this. Now, if we had been on this island in a very aggravated state, we could not have had much effect. I'm speaking of all these people. There were a lot of people who didn't want it, and that's a pattern. A lot of people who didn't need it, and that's a pattern. When you begin focusing and getting into rapport with an existing pattern, you give more energy to that pattern. And the pattern was, no, we really don't want this, okay? We don't need this. The people who were not in rapport were the ones who were afraid and upset, but there were many more people who were not. And because of that, the focused work could have a greater effect. And I was using the thought I was using as a symbol the track just going south and the hurricane weakening and disappearing, which is exactly what it did. Okay? Now, it's not because I did it. I can't take credit for that. What I did was tune into the existing pattern and give it more energy. And that's what all the other people were doing too.